them before. So if we now move to item 6, the performance exceptions report, and Peter Ryan, welcome to the table. Now, Peter, you'll recall we'd agreed that staff would give just a short introduction to each report around its purpose and the frequency that it comes here before we move into any commentary on the report itself. So if I can invite you to do that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Look, the purpose of this report is to look at Council's performance at a high level against its performance targets, with a specific focus on the exceptions. There's more detail in the more operational reports that come after this around the capital program and so forth, but it's meant to be a high-level view of how we're tracking against the key things. It's a monthly report, and it's come to this committee for many years now. The aim is also to show you trends over time, not just a snapshot. So exception-focused and trends over time. And moving through, the simple description is it's steady. Levels of service are steady where they were last month and over time. We're at 86% against a target of 85. So we're tracking the same as last month and basically the same as last year as well. Now, what that means towards the middle of the year is that you can probably start to anticipate now that we're looking at a similar result to last year. Mid-year is when it starts to come into focus, and there's a correlation between what it looks like and what you're going to get at the end of June. So, in short, unless something dramatic happens, and we're working our way through the Book of Revelations, we'll probably finish where we did last year. Same thing applies really to capital projects. The exceptions around the watch list are steady with last month. Your breakdown that you've asked for is a specific recipe, whole of life over multiple years, split out between watch list projects and cycleways. And the bottom line of that is that we're steady. Whole of life for watch lists is around 63% against the target, and major cycleways higher up around the 89% mark. The exceptions for the major capital projects are over the page. One of them there, Metro Sport, is subject to a change request to move it from January 20 to January 22. There are some others there that have a small delay, a month or two, and others that have a more significant delay of 7 or even up to 15 months. But they're the exceptions. That's the focus of this report. There'll be more detail in Ruth's report, which follows. In terms of the level of service exceptions, the detail behind them, look, reasonably steady. They're mostly in the areas you'd expect: water supply, roads, footpaths. There's been a bit of a jump around parks since August. It's escalated a bit, and the exceptions follow in the detailed report after this. Also, the managers who report those exceptions are invited to this meeting to speak to any queries you may have. I try, but I don't necessarily know all the detail behind every level of service. So what follows there is the list of level of service exceptions, and look, I don't line by line those, but I'm certainly happy to field questions on any particular level of service exception. I should explain to the newer councillors the colours. I'm pretty sure you'll be across it already, but red is a forecast saying we're not going to make this. We're actually tipping a fail. Yellow means, look, this needs work, this needs corrective action or intervention. So it's a flag warning. It could be salvaged, but it depends on focus and circumstance and all those other factors. Are there any questions around the level of service exceptions?
So questions for Peter on this report. Is there any questions? Anne.
Thanks, Peter. I just wondered about the Parks and Foreshore one, the fact that a target of 100% compliance is unachievable and that this target must be reset. Can you tell us a bit more about that, or is there a staff member that could? What does that actually mean, and what's happened there?
Well, there are two levels to that. One is the technical bit around setting levels of service, and then if there is anyone here who can speak to it, I'll ask them to at a content level. Look, the last LTP, I'll be upfront. I don't believe the levels of service were well considered for all sorts of reasons that are covered by the review. it's always debatable whether a 100% target is a good idea, but around something legislative or consent-based, it's very hard to accept less than that. The simple view is here, you look at the past and how close you've got and go, well, is 100% realistic if we've never got more than 50? But with most of those, they're up in the high 90s and it just takes a single event to trigger it. Is it the end of the world? Probably not. But it does serve to put the breach in front of the council so that you can see what's going on, rather than finding out about it at the end of the year.
So does that suggest to us that we have to adjust our expectations in terms of this?
I don't think so. I think what it suggests is that setting the level of service target at 85 is a prudent move, so that it takes into account the fact that stuff happens in life. A consent isn't issued, or we fail one time in 1,000 on a particular process, and therefore it's okay to have a little bit of buffer. If we set our levels of service at 100, it would drive behaviours to avoid any failure or transparency. By accepting that there's a little bit of headroom, it's okay, and you still get to see the exception and the reason and understand it. So in other words, a red with a good story beats a green that's not true. Is that a...
Right. Great, thank you. Jimmy.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions on page 18. Regarding to the citizen and the customer service, particularly for customer expectation, those one, if we're in the call center, our target is no more than 90 seconds. But comes in here, year to date is 112. Because I myself, I have I make a phone call on behalf of the residents regarding to issue. Even last month, I make a couple of times phone call. Actually, 3 minutes still, put into a voice the message. But compared to a previous year, we take a long time. I assume probably council focus on our digital device, It's convenient if you send the email or from the kind of web, etc., we can get response, But this one still important, particularly for those no kind of computer, no digital device, etc. Still, so now actually, those phone call service, my view, because this my...
Is this moving to a question, Jimmy?
Yeah, question, yes. Just want to know how to improve this one. That's the first question.
Well, look, I think the remedial action's pretty good, actually. It says that they recognise the problem. They're moving their roster and rotation to push more staff onto the busy days to address that exact problem. So, look, as remedial actions go, that one's reasonably thorough, but it only starts in January. So the upside is they seem to have a solution. The downside is it won't start for a month.
Second one is regarding to the community support, governance and partnership, just under this one.
Yep.
Here, little targets at least 41%. Comments actually from 2019 is we increased to 33, and compared to 2018 is 4% from 29. That's pretty good. But we set up this target. I just want to know, particularly for the remedial action, and we increase candidate number of votes turnout. That's good. That's part of them. But here, particular mention is the community, the participation and the contributor should be covered the whole kind of the ratepayer, and residents. So the active citizenship, we already mentioned, we need to warrant to engage, like children or youth or a particular multi-active one. This area, my view, still we should offer more active, to try to increase the wide range. Otherwise, we would like to increase 41, but I have been adult if we still follow our traditional way for the consultation and engagement. This is my concern. Okay. Unless we have a breakthrough.
Well, look, just quick observations. Nationally, these are hard. The national results are not, because of the nature of the topic, you don't get 90% kind of enthusiasm for it. The second thing is the post-quake environment has been riddled in Christchurch with plans, releases, strategies and so forth, and there's probably a bit of fatigue around any kind of engagement given the number and volume and complexity of them over the last 9 years. Having said that, if you look at the LTP engagement plan that we discussed as a group the other day, that's basically 180 degrees on what we used to do. It's looking at the old thing and saying, we're not going to build a complex plan and then ask you to send us a piece of paper. We're going to go out to you with a whole bunch of new streams that we've never used before. So I guess on the downside, it's hard to move this. On the upside, we've got plans in place to move it. So,
Thank you. Yanni.
Thank you. Just in regards to that one again, it says that remedial action is continue to promote, and goes on to say increase candidate numbers and voter turnout in local body elections. Do you know what work is underway to assess the remedial actions that we put in place to do that, and how that's reported back to council?
I can't speak to that in detail. That would be a combination of the support team and the communication team. And I'd have to go and find out what they're doing in that space. I don't know off the top of my head.
I just raise it with the committee chair. Previously council gets quite comprehensive reports about what mechanisms they used in the local body election to do these things.
Yes.
We still haven't seen that for this election.
Okay.
And it would be quite good just to get some sense of, things like kids vote, what effort was put into areas with low voter turnout to try and increase voter turnout, etc. If that's kind of the key thing.
I can find out and bring that back to the next meeting.
Yeah, well, the chair may have.
Yeah, indeed. Our chief executive is making some notes as we speak. I'm sure we can get some information back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Just coming back to the top of page 17.
Sorry, I did have one.
You do have one more.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just trying to find the page that the one. thing that I find a bit troubling is around the property files. So it's just on page 19. It says we're unable to currently report on the actual percentage of property files provided to customers, and then it talks about we're in the process of creating a tableau report. This is a service, as I understand it, that we contract out to recall. Can anyone give us just a little bit more understanding about how we can't get this information and why we're having to set up a new system?
Young Sam Hay can answer your questions, I think, so just let him address that.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam Hay. I'm the Head of Business Solutions in the Consenting and Compliance team. So the comment there is that we don't have an active or accurate tableau report. Obviously, the world's moved on since that was written. So up until that point, we had been recording that light as green as if it had been accurate and we were performing the task as it should be. When I went and did a sample check in May, June of this year, I discovered that there were some open files, and what that meant was the report was still recording 100%, yet the supporting data meant it couldn't be true. The report that I'm referring to was literally incorrect and recording data from the data, what we call the data warehouse, in an inaccurate manner. Right, so that was the reason why the report was inaccurate. Since then, we've corrected the data source and corrected all the data anomalies that lead to the inaccurate report. So back to your original question, the light has two parts to it. There is a level of service for electronic records, and there is a level of service for records held by recall that are off-site. In both instances, the data was incorrect. So since then, we have corrected the data, we have corrected the report. We now believe the accurate number is in fact 89.9 across both streams, which is obviously not 99%. At the same time, we've corrected the staff training that was leading to the inaccurate data, and we've brought all of those staff into one team. So the challenge I had at that time was literally I was responsible for a level of service, but was lacking the visibility to deliver what we should be delivering. So since then that has happened. There is, again, an additional level of complexity in so much that manual files are also requested and delivered by another part of the council. That service will be with me as of February of next year. So in terms of, I'd rather be just excruciatingly honest and say we haven't hit that level of service, but I would say there's nothing left I can do to correct it.
There's no, at a simple level, if I'm a resident and I want to get a property file, about 90% of the time, if I do it electronically or the actual hard copy, will be within these levels of service, within either 5 days or 2 days.
Correct.
And there's nothing concerning about the performance of our contractor that means that we should be doing anything in terms of review?
So the work with the internal service, I would expect to see a increase in that level of service in the next reporting cycle. That's simply because of the awareness that I now have and the focus that we are now putting on that. In terms of the off-site record with our partners being Iron Mountain and Converger, they have experienced some issues in what I call the scanning part of the process, and that is getting better as well, but unfortunately it is not where it needs to be.
Just a final question on this one. To the chair. As part of the Section 70A review, are we going to look at property files, storage, access? Is that something that comes up in a review in terms of our levels of service and our service delivery mechanism?
I don't recall this, I may be wrong, and I'm happy to confirm, but I don't recall this being subject to a 17A review.
All right, let's get some information back on that. Thank you.
Cheers, Sam.
Thank you. So, coming back to the subject of 100% compliance and achievability, top of page 17, Parks and Foreshore, remedial action. This target must be reset to a realistic level in the next LTP. Now, I guess from my point of view, when I look at these reports and I go looking at the red flags, what I want is to see what there is that we can do something about, or what there is where there are genuine concerns, and what action is going to be taken to bring those from red to amber and back to green. This is one where what we're really saying is we set the wrong target in the LTP. Whilst we want to be ambitious as a council and while we want to achieve, at the same time, having unrealistic targets just really skews these reports because it drives our attention to things that we actually possibly can't do anything about. Is there a review happening as part of the LTP preparation, identifying if there are other levels of service which have also got unrealistic or unachievable targets like this? Because it would be good to tease them all out, pick them all up, so that we change all of the levels of service so that they are achievable at that time. I don't necessarily need an answer to that question now, but I think it's something that we need to look at, and it needs to feed into the LTP work.
The answer's straightforward. First up, target must be reset. The manager signed off this target. All levels of service are signed off by the head of. So in that sense, there's been obviously a crossed wire or a misunderstanding. The second step is we've reinstated the idea that managers will pitch their activity plan, which includes their level of service, to council for conversation, discussion, Q&A. The third step is that my team is working with each head of to provide them with a guide to what a good smart measure looks like, including achievability. We're working with them and what we call the pit crew, so finance, strategy, other contributors, to drive the quality of level of service up. So in other words, there's a support panel around a manager to both advise but also critique. In this instance, 100% might be completely achievable if the timeframes are. So it's not the percentage that's the problem. It's the if the timeframes are wildly unrealistic, then 100% is never going to work. So what they're doing is looking at past performance, benchmarks, and critical examination by external people around the level of service they set, and arriving at a good first view to bring to council of what they're going to do as levels of service. So they'll have been through a lot of filters before they even get to you. Then presumably you'll have your own take on what they need to deliver, and whether it's too stretchy or not stretchy enough. Because that's the other option, is that we fold back to a very safe set of targets, but they don't deliver what you need or value for money. So it's that just right spot that's the hard one, and you get there by work.
Yep, but clearly from the answer, there's a process to pick all of that up and for us to make some decisions at that time. That's good.
There are literally scores of people involved in that process.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Any further questions on this report? All right, so we've got a resolution in front of us to receive the information in the monthly performance exceptions report, which I'm happy to move. Sam MacDonald will second. All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thanks very much, Peter. Thank you.